I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Amal Graafstra, book author, TEDx speaker, and CEO of the biohacking companies Dangerous Things and VivoKey Technologies. Amal has various RFID and NFC implants in his body that open doors, start vehicles, unlocks his smart gun, and logs into computers. Prior to his current roles, Amal's experience includes numerous executive and IT-related roles at firms including Walletmor, Everfind, and the medical biotech company Morpheus, Atomic Mobile, Silicon Energy, and more. He joins us today to discuss the intersection of information technology and medicine with a focus on the future of identity and security management. So, Amal, welcome, sir. It is a pleasure to have you with us today. We're talking about NFC and RFID microchip implants. You are one of the first and most well-known do-it-yourself RFID implantees in the world. So let me start out by asking, what implants do you have? What do they do? And how do they work?
Sure, that's a great starting question. Right now, at the moment, I think I have around 9 of them. Many of them are prototypes, or prototypes turned product. They more or less do kind of the same things. I have my original one that I got in 2005 here in my left hand. That's just going to stay there for nostalgia. But I still do use it. It's a low frequency. I'm going to rattle off a bunch of technical stuff that may or may not make sense to anybody, but it's an EM4102. It's a 125 kilohertz low frequency transponder. All my transponders are passive, meaning they don't have batteries. There's no charging, there's no maintenance, which is actually a pretty important tenet of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And anything that I design, I want to be maintenance free and friction free. So no charging. But for the most part, when you think about identity and human use context, that means usually it means access to something. So some form of access control, access to your bank account, access to that door, access to drive the car, access to log in or whatever. So for the general purpose, it is for the most part access. Um, because RFID, particularly passive RFID, is a big umbrella of technologies. I have different chip types at different frequencies that work or be compatible with certain other things that are already off the shelf or exist in the field. So I have this one. I have a flex version, which is a very thin biopolymer version of the implants that I make here, so I can do fist bumping of readers, that kind of thing. I have another one here that is a cryptographic. It's VivoKey's first product with Spark 1. It's a cryptographic chip there. It does challenge response for validated cryptographic proved identity. Then I have in here, you can see a little scar there and a big scar here. This is like the prototype area. So right now I have a VivoKey Apex, which is a smart card platform capable of doing, EMV tap and pay like Apple Pay payments, capable of doing Bitcoin wallet transactions, capable of running, arbitrary code. So I can write a program in Java card and upload it to the chip. It'll run there. So any number of things that I can do and just deploy those applications with my phone in the field over the air. Then I have, just some basic high frequency transponder for NFC sharing, so data sharing, that kind of thing. Another low frequency one here. Another a copy, a duplicate. So I have a backup. I have two. I'm rocking 2 wrists here. So Apex. And then here I have a prototype of a device that is being used for medical biosensor applications, pulse oximetry, other things like that. So we're testing some things out there. Yeah, so that's kind of just the gamut of what I have at the moment.
Yeah, this is absolutely amazing. So this isn't in my questions, but I want to mention to the audience that you and I met and we had lunch and you walked me through all of this a couple of weeks back. And I was just absolutely blown away, not only by how far the technology has come, but what you can do with it as well. So in your case, these implants are work related. I mean, various people have what they call subdermal implants for artistic purposes and various reasons. But you are the founder, again, of VivoKey, which specializes in contactless security, identity, blockchain, and payment technologies, as well as being the founder of Dangerous Things, which is doing biohacking. So can you tell me a little bit about the companies and what the companies are involved with?
Sure. 1 second. There we go. And make sure I don't wheeze into your microphone here. Yeah, so dangerous things. Oh, well, I'll kind of go through a quick history. So the first thing I did was I put this transponder here in 2005. That was there because I was just kind of wanting to be a little bit lazy. I didn't want to have to carry my keys around, and I was working at a medical office in a basement and doing IT work for the nearby clinics. So I had a very large jailer's key ring, and I would leave it. It was cumbersome, so I'd leave it in places. And I would walk out of my office door, which was in the basement of this clinic, and it had a emergency crash door kind of thing that you couldn't really unlock. It was just always locked. You just leave, and then it would lock behind you. And then when I would do that in 2 in the morning, I would have to annoy a very upset maintenance person to let me back in.
Mm.
And that happened a couple times. And I was like, this can't go on. Right. So I just wanted the door to know that it's me somehow. And I looked at like biometrics, like fingerprint and iris or whatever. They were expensive, clunky, and not well suited for outdoors. The sensors were kind of finicky. And so I thought, well, badges, RFID, tap in, boop, boop. That's robust. It's impervious to the elements. It's cheap, right? And it just works. And so but I thought, replacing my metal keys with a card isn't really fixing my problem. I still have to manage this thing that identifies me. It's a token of my identity. And so I was like, you know what? Animals have been getting these things, livestock, pets, those kind of things. That's RFID. Why not me? So some quick research into it, and I found, okay, well, I don't really want to get a pet implant for a couple reasons. It's not the right protocols. The readers are expensive, and it's whatever. But also, animal fascia tissue is very loose, and so it has a little anti-migration coating on there that lets your tissue kind of lock it in place. I didn't want that, just in case I ever wanted to swap it out or whatever. And human tissue is much more dense in the fascia, so not needed. I found a company that made the animal ones. I said, "Do you make it with other chips in there, but the same materials?" They said, "Yes." I said, "Send me some samples." I had a conversation with my doctor, who was a client of mine at the time. So I had many clients as medical doctors, and just did it. And so for me, it was a no-brainer. Awesome. I made a little access reader for the door, popping in and out. I was happy. And then some people got wind of it. A friend of mine posted some pictures. Things kind of blew up. Ended up writing a book for Wiley Publishing called RFID Toys. Then things kind of died down for a bit, but around 2012, 2013, the maker revolution was going strong. People were starting to build electronic hobbyist projects again. And that's when the book finally became relevant that I wrote in 2007. It became relevant for these hobbyists. So a lot of people started asking me like, hey, you have an implant, how can I do that? I want to get that done. And so the amount of emails started to go way up. And I was like, well, I can either ignore this or I can try to wrap some kind of business model around it. And that's what Dangerous Things was born. I said, this has to be something that I can't just call it like safeimplants.com or whatever, like this has to be, these are cutting edge people doing cutting edge things. Let's have fun with it and be realistic about what we're doing. Um, and kind of poke fun a little bit at the grandmas who are like, this is dangerous. I'm like, dangerous things. So I was like, yeah, sure. So I bought the domain off a guy, and I set up the shop. And I started the company with two goals. One, make sure that the stuff that we were selling was actually tested and safe, because there was a lot of industrial stuff out there. I don't know if you know, but a lot of car keys have immobilizers with these chips inside, and they
Mm.
look
Okay.
identical, but the glass is not safe, and they're just not made to the same rigor that an implant is. So people were like taking those keys apart and trying to put that in their hand any old way, like just jam it in, and then now I can start my car. Like, don't do that. So we say, okay, self-safe things, and also make sure that the installation procedures are as safe as possible. I mean, we can't do the installs, but we need to make sure that somehow we make that safe. So started Dangerous Things. Our first product sold, which was the low frequency EM, technology. Then very quickly realized, okay, NFC is starting to be a thing. It's starting to be in phones, starting to be everywhere. Let's make the world's first NFC compliant implantable transponder. And so we did a Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign, raised 4 times the goal. And so then that's when I said, okay, this is a thing. So then we started designing our own stuff, doing our own consignment manufacturing. So very important that you do your own materials acquisitions and your own, bonding of all those materials. If you just pay some factory in China, hey, make a bunch of these, they will pump out whatever junk they have, and your lots won't even be the same. It'll just be materials mixed in, and so if you're dealing with anything that goes in the body, you don't want any of that. So as much control as possible. Kept building that business, and then around 2015, 2016, 2017, the type of customer began to change from a very technical customer. The first people were asking like, where's the data sheet? How can I program? The next batch of customers later on were more like, this seems cool. What can I do with it? Or I want to use this at my work. Can I do that? Like that, that kind of thing. So less technical, more interested in the applications. And I realized that Dangerous Things selling basic transponder technology, the thing that's in your badge or whatever, that is great for personal scope applications, meaning your car, your computer, your door, whatever. But if you want broader scope applications like banking and transactions and internet standard authentication and anything like that, you're going to need a fundamentally different product, something that's secure and supports crypto and has integrations and partnerships. And so because of that, I started VivoKey Technologies, which is very much a much friendlier company. If you come to like a Bank of America and you say, hey, we are VivoKey Technologies, we want to do this thing, versus, hey, we're Dangerous Things, let's do a thing, right? So Dangerous Things still on the kind of the cutting edge, bleeding edge, as some people might say, of playing around the biohacking space and making new products and features and technologies there. VivoKey's focused specifically at expanding those broader scope applications. And so VivoKey worked on the Spark identity platform project. We have the Apex platform now, which is a smart card platform that I talked about. Apex also supports a big feature right now, which we're going through certification for, but the FIDO security key standard. We have a FIDO application on it. So, like a security token you tap or whatever, now you can do that as an implant. So this internet standard, WebAuthn supported, FIDO2 compliant, like all that stuff is great. And you can use that in enterprise or personal. And it's a huge leap in terms of personal identity security for authentication and identity, because the fundamental idea that I'm really adamant about and pushing through VivoKey is I really don't like the consolidation of our identity and authority. Authority being like, how can I assert that I am the correct person to be accessing this account or doing this behavior or transaction? That is slipping away from us, the biological entity sitting here in this seat. That's slipping away from us, and it's being given to Google and Apple and our devices, really, and the companies behind those devices. And while it sounds like this is the ultimate, of like giving my identity to an implant company, what's actually happening is FIDO is an example, a perfect example of autonomous identity. It is a standard. You buy a product that is capable, just like buying a security token. Just because you use that security token to secure your identity online doesn't mean that you've given any part of that identity to Ubico or any of these companies. They just provided you a widget that does this thing securely for you. And the same thing is true of Apex. So it's your property, your identity, you manage it, it's yours, right? But the difference is, unlike a fob, you don't lose this thing or you don't forget it. It's always available and it's frictionless. It's totally like management free. So if we're going to have any hope of really asserting a digital security and digital identity online, particularly in the age of AI, where now deep fakes, I mean, you don't even know if you're talking to me. Like, how could I assert my identity to you prior to this call? That could be somebody else with a deep fake going on. But so the idea that you can have your biological identity be validated digitally through an implant that you really can't, loan to someone else. You can't lose it, can't be stolen. Um, that's a great thing, in my opinion. Like that's the ultimate of being able to retain your sovereignty as a biological and digital citizen, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And it's certainly that identity. So yeah,
No, and that's that. This is wonderful. These are the big ideas. So I want to back up a little bit and go to what people can actually do with this, though, because
sure,
I
sure,
think one of the things, when people stop and they start to think about it, like where do we use security tokens, right? And that could be a key, it could be a payment card, it could be, when you stop and think about where we use those, right? We've got keys for the house, the car, the office. You've got credit cards, debit cards, all sorts of security and authentication and payment tools. And we have to manage these. And then on top of that, and I've actually talked about this in the past, when it comes to computer logins and passwords, right? I mean, the whole idea behind passwords started back in the days when people had like one or two, and and proper authentication for those was okay. come up with the password, don't write it down, don't share it, it stays in your head. Well, most of us now have like, I think the average person has over 200 logins and passwords,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
browsers have done a little bit in terms of maintaining those, but generally speaking, our security apparatus that just comes from daily life is just out of control. So
Yeah.
for anybody who's wondering why they'd want an implant, I mean, microchip implants can be used for, you mentioned payments like Apple Pay, Tesla car key registration, security key authentication, smartphone NFC data sharing, OpenPGP, multi-factor authentication, secure website and computer logins, as well as health monitoring applications, which is a giant one for people in what we're calling the sandwich generation, which is me, right? Where I have children and elderly parents. And if you've got both of those, you're looking at various health monitoring applications as well as children monitoring applications. So
Yeah. Yeah. So to clarify, I just want to say that payment EMV, tap and pay, like Apple Pay type thing, that is a technical possibility, but it currently is not a legitimate possibility because the networks involved, Visa, Mastercard, they just refuse to allow it to be on their
okay.
network is all. But there are payment devices and options that are basically conversions. So Dangerous Things offers a conversion service for certain devices that are contactless only, like key fobs and things. Typically, actually sold in the EU, not here in the States. We have full size cards that are dual interface, but they're not easily converted. But effectively, what we do is over there you can just say, hey, yeah, I want to add this tap and pay key fob to my account. You do that, then what we do is take the chip out of that little key fob and make it into an implant and send it back, and then you can put that in and use it for tap and pay. But it's not a legitimately recognized solution at this time. We hope to change that, but we've been knocking on those doors for years now, and it's just always been an emphatic no. When it comes to other types of applications in that arena, it really is going to have to take more of a social acceptance and agreement, and just understanding that it's that this is not weird. This is not a
Yeah.
fly by night thing. This is like the future. This is what's happening. And so many banks will come to us and say, we want this. We want to offer an implant option for our customers. We send them to their Mastercard reps or Visa reps, and they come back and go, "Oh, it's not allowed."
Well,
And so, yeah,
I wanted to jump into the security part too, and this was
yeah,
something that you sold me on this. Again, when we had lunch, you absolutely sold me on this. But again, just to remind people, in today's world, money and identity depend almost entirely on passwords, and those can be hacked. Biometrics, like your fingerprint, which is used for pretty much all the Apple devices out there, those can be faked. Key fobs can be stolen. Cards can be faked or replicated. And this is why cybercrime has cost the global economy around $7 trillion. That was back in 2022, and that's on the rise, $7 trillion per year in cybercrime. And that is just from things being hacked. And a lot of times that's social engineering, where maybe it isn't even compromised itself. They get the person to give it to them, and then it's used inappropriately, right? And
yeah.
so the implant technology you're working on can help alleviate this.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing to understand about how this works is that there are mediums and channels, right? And those mediums and channels are not necessarily secure in and of themselves. It's how you implement your application. Meaning, for example, everything you listed, like fingerprints, passwords, social security numbers, payment card numbers, whatever, those are all what I just call static data. It's just some piece of information. Passwords are just some piece of information. You can change that periodically, but it's just some static string. There's nothing special about it. Your fingerprints that you submit to a sensor, those are converted into a digital static piece of information. That's just, it is what it is. It's like your social security number. You just give it, and that's it. What's possible with proper cryptographic security is what's called a public-private key or a challenge response system. So at no point are you saying to someone, here's my special password and my crypto key, right? You're not giving them anything. What's happening is that service or whatever you're trying to log into, that issues a challenge, some random, totally meaningless piece of information, string of characters that goes into your crypto token. Your token then takes that and generates a response, and sends that response back. That response is going to be unique per the challenge. It's going to rotate every time, even if it gets the same challenge. But the point is that at no point does the service get, you're not sharing a shared secret, right? Like if you and I want to confirm, right? The old school decoder ring style system is called symmetric crypto, and it's just basically you and I share some decoder password, and then we can exchange information. But how do you do that with an unknown party? How do you securely share that decoder password? You can't. And so that's why basically in the 70s there were all these kinds of advances in crypto to be able to do this. And this is how your browser can secure a session with the web server without ever knowing the web server. It's through this process of challenge response and public-private asymmetric cryptographic proofs. And so in that way, you could use these tokens, and these exist in security keys you carry around, the FIDO security fobs and stuff. But that same technology exists as an option in the Apex platform implant. And so the whole world is starting to change over to these secure crypto things. You see passkeys, which is a version of FIDO2. You're going to see security tokens, security key support. And so as the world kind of wakes up to the dangers of passwords, and particularly biometrics, which I kind of rallied against before, but I'll explain a little bit. Your fingerprint is static; it doesn't change, and when you submit it to a sensor and it gets converted to its little digital version of that static information, if that's ever compromised, you can't. Unlike a password, you can't change your fingerprint. So it's a real problem, right? Biometrics, in my opinion, are worse than passwords because they are great at identifying you, particularly by third party. If a third party wants to identify you, there are tons of biometric ways to do that, but it's not secure enough to actually be useful to you. It's only useful to third parties for identification purposes. So I really don't like and don't give my biometric data to anybody. I don't use the fingerprint sensors on my phone. I don't do any registrations of biometrics because at least if my password is compromised, there's a possibility I could at least change it, right? My fingerprint is compromised, forget it, right? And this is being seen everywhere. Like people are even posting high resolution photos of themselves going like peace, and people are taking the fingerprints from the image that they posted online publicly and printing 3D printing fake thumbs and opening stuff and doing all kinds of stuff. But anyway, the point is that as we move to a fundamentally more secure society, management of the keys, management of the tokens. I mean, you hear about people losing their Bitcoin wallet, private keys all the time, and that's lost forever. Cryptograph, cryptography in general, it works, and that's great. But it means that because it works so well, if you lose those keys or mismanage those tokens or whatever, you're in real trouble because now you've securely locked yourself out. And so that's another problem that an implant form factor helps solve. You could easily have the same technology on a fob, but now you have to manage this fob. And we really see a lot of times where people have this security fob. They'll be traveling with their laptop. They need the fob to access certain resources, company resources, personal websites, whatever. They'll throw the fob in with the laptop or just leave it plugged into the laptop because security and convenience are often diametrically opposed, right? And so then somebody walks off with a laptop bag with the laptop and the security token, and the whole point is now moot because they have both things, right? And
Yeah.
so by making that security always available, always an option, zero thought, zero effort into managing it, that's the goal, right? I want every computer and phone in my life to be easily swappable, replaceable. I want to be able to borrow your phone and still have all my identity here, not in my phone. I want to be able to pick up any phone and get access to what I need to because I'm the important thing here, not the phone, not the laptop. I'm the important thing. And so by moving and migrating all these aspects of my digital identity out of my devices, just making them dumb terminals or dumb pipes to my services that I want to access, I don't have to manage those devices either. I don't have to care so much that, oh, my particular phone that has all my identity stuff is now lost or stolen or whatever.
Well, so I want to get now into the medical aspect. I touched on this a moment ago, but
Mhm.
again, I'm like a lot of Americans. I have elderly parents who have multiple medical conditions and limited mobility, right? And a few years back, I looked into the Apple Watch, which is being used as kind of a biomedical device. And the
Mhm.
idea was maybe I could get them a watch, but that has its own set of problems. Number one, I believe both Apple as well as I believe the competitors, you have to have the watch keyed to a phone. They have to understand how to set that up and get all the technology in place. Then they have to keep and basically they have to wear the watch, keep track of both the watch and the phone, keep them in proximity with each other, the whole 9 yards, right?
Yeah.
So it
And they
it
have to make
adds
sure that those things are charged. That's the number one
yes.
maintenance management. Management will kill you, right? Like I always say, we have three modern day Tamagotchi. I don't know if you remember Tamagotchis, the little
Mm-mm,
keychain pets. So in the 80s and 90s, there was this craze of it was a little keychain, but it had a little digital LCD and a little some buttons, but it was called a Tamagotchi, and it was a little digial pet, and you had to
mm.
take care of it. You had to like remember to feed it and remember to do that, otherwise it would die. And you're like, oh my Tamagotchi. So, but it demanded your attention, demanded maintenance, and so our modern day Tamagotchi are phone, wallet, and keys. You
Okay.
can't live your modern life without those things always in proximity, right? And they have to be functioning, meaning your phone has to be charged. It needs signal, it needs all these things. And so those modern day Tamagotchi are pretty much everybody understands. If you add to that something that you're not used to, an additional management burden, like a Fitbit or a watch or another thing you have to charge, another thing you have to maintain, it becomes exponentially harder for people to accept that and do that regularly. So for to ask an elderly or disabled person to add to their management burden, um, that's just it's just not going to work, right? And so that's where you see these kind of plans fall down, and
But
that's again where, yeah,
you know,
implants, I think.
I mean, if I could jump in there though, you
Sure.
have a pulse oximetry sensor in your wrist. That was one of the things that I looked at. And I think, I mean, anybody who's seen the Apple events has seen testimonials from people saying, look, the Apple Watch saved my life. And there are a number of ways that it's used, right? So, in terms of basic exercise, you have runners who wear the watch and they can check their pace, they can check their
Mhm.
oximetry. Are they hitting their goals? Are they exceeding them? Are making gains? And all of that, even if it's not processed in the device, it goes to the phone and they can look at it in their phone, right? But in terms of the elderly, it's even more important because there are cases where it can tell them, "Hey, you are having a heart attack," and it can actually be set up in some circumstances to call emergency services or,
Mhm.
I mean, various things, right? Like if a person with limited mobility falls and they're injured and they can't reach their phone, it could be set up to do that. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't want to get too much into the applications, but the idea
Sure.
is if they have an implant tied to this, you can do biomedical monitoring and you could send that to the phone or nearby devices. And that's something that, again, as the child of elderly parents, I would
Mhm.
love to be able to work with my parents and have something like that available for them.
Yeah, and this, to be clear, this is where we want to get to, but there are challenges because a phone, anything that's doing monitoring, real-time monitoring, transmitting data, that all needs power, right? And so, as I mentioned earlier, I only work with passive devices at this time, which means that right now this monitor is inert. It's not doing
Mm,
anything. There's no
okay.
power. It's dead. It's great for spot checking if I want to tap right and check on it. And I will say that if you can get the person that you're in charge of caring for the person that you're caring for to add on to their maintenance burden. An Apple Watch, that system is great. Like it does fall detection for you. It can call automatically. There's a
Yeah.
lot of awesome things about it, and there's just some realistic, practical issues with the maintenance burden, and that's really just the challenge. So for what we wanted to do in building a sensor like this, we're starting with passive. We're starting with the idea that maybe we could start for areas where the watch doesn't make sense, and that's like active combat, that's active firefighting, that's somewhere where you don't want a watch banging around inside what you're trying to do, and you don't want a you don't want a system where if you get sweat and dirt between it and you, it's going to start not functioning correctly. And so, wearables in those extreme scenarios are not very conducive to accurate data or being managed in the field. It's just not something that works. But for our implant, there are ways to do that so that you can do telemetry with an external suit integrated reader and telemetry that's built into the battle networks that already exist. These kind of systems that are already there, we add to it additional sensor data to collect. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to go in that direction. There are battery technologies being developed right now for electric cars that have new chemistries, safer chemistries, things that you can build into implants that basically allow you to have a consumer priced product and without all the additional expense that would normally go into putting a very unsafe technology like lithium ion into something like a pacemaker. Like
Yeah.
those do exist, but the cost is astronomical, right? Because it's extremely dangerous. Lithium ion explodes. We know that from Samsung phones and vape pens and hoverboards, and so you don't want, you know, you don't want to pay 10 grand for your grandma's monitor, right? You want to pay a couple $100, right? And your insurance company definitely doesn't want to pay super high price for that. And being able to actually integrate a safe chemistry opens things up to consumer options as well. You, I believe that if you want to do this kind of monitoring or use this kind of technology, you don't and you shouldn't have to consider it to be a medical device. And right now, these implants are not considered a medical device. They're more of like a functional body jewelry. FDA has very clear requirements. If it ticks any of these boxes, it's a medical device. We need approval from FDA, and we don't tick any of those boxes right now. As soon as we start talking about monitoring, medical data, patient identity, anything like that, then we do check one of those boxes, and we need to go through that process. But even if we do that and get FDA approval for a monitor, I firmly believe that it shouldn't be something you have to go and get a prescription for
Yeah.
just so your insurance company can pay the crazy cost of it. I want people to be able to access the technology in a more democratized way, and making it cheap enough to do that is a big part of it.
Well, and this actually comes to the next part of this, which is having this be required in any way, right? Like, for instance, employers requiring this, which is something we probably don't want. But then, the question becomes, who would want implants? And I think there are a lot of people out there who are like, well, I don't want anything like that in my body. Who would put an implant in their body? And the answer to that is over 1 million American women used the Norplant birth control, and there are 4% of American women between 15 and 44 years old who are currently on birth control using Nexplanon, which is a birth control implant that goes in your arm. And it's actually pretty easy. I have seen these inserted, and it's just kind of a needle. The implant slides into the needle. Once it's in place, you can feel it with your hand, but it stays out of the way. It doesn't cause any problems, and they can remove it at any time, right? You have to go into your doctor. They do a small incision, but the idea there is that in terms of for things that matter, right? Birth control, where if you forget it, you could be in for a world of trouble.
Mhm.
Millions of American women have chosen to get implants. And so the hope would be that over time, people would, I guess, warm up to the idea of RFID implants in the same way. For the things that are important, it's
Yeah.
worth the minor procedure.
Yeah, and you could say, I mean, even IUDs, those are a form of implant.
Yeah.
Tooth fillings are a form of implant. I mean, we get implants on a general daily basis. There's thousands of Americans getting implants. But what it comes down to is what's the difference? It's the applications, really, is what we're
Yeah.
talking about. And so, until there's an application that's compelling, then don't get an implant. Don't get an RFID implant. You don't need one. If there's something that's compelling to you, then do but it's no different. In fact, the diameter of our X series implants are the same diameter as the Norplant, but they are a fourth of the length. So Norplant is 40 millimeters long. Ours are 12 millimeters long. So it's effectively the same procedure as getting a Norplant, only way less, way less of an impact. It's safer than getting body jewelry, piercings, things like that. So really it just comes down to, are any of the movie tropes true? Can I track people around? Can I, blow it up remotely? Can the government shut it down? No. Like the answer is no to all of that. Like all the TV movies and all that kind of media. Every time you see an implant in media, it's always a liability for the person. It's a bad thing for the person with the implant. But that's because of the applications they dreamed up in the script writing process. They don't exist. They're not real, true, actual applications. I mean, the reality is pets have been getting these chips for decades, and you can't find your lost pet. You can't track it around. That's not part of the deal. Like it has to be taken to the vet and scanned with a scanner. And again, there's no battery here. There's nothing transmitting. It gets power from the giant magnetic field antenna coil in the reader, and that bubble extends about a couple inches. So if you're within a couple inches, then yes, you could track it right there, right? But that's
Yeah.
it. Like it's none of these things. And so I find that people with the biggest objections, um, they tend to have this kind of uneasy distrust of a technology because they're just not familiar with it, and that's totally fair. That's how we evolved. That's how we got it here. We're leery about things we don't know about. We're cautious, right? And that's kept us alive as a species. But if you just get over that fear enough to actively learn about something, then typically those fears go away. And in fact, a lot of people come back and like, oh, you know what? Now I have a reason. I got this thing, or I got a work badge I lost the other day and it was annoying me. So, or I got a new electric lock for my house and I want to try to get in without a key. Like those kind of applications. Once a compelling application arises, really it's like the decision of do I get an ear piercing or get an implant for this thing? And it's like
Well,
no different than get a little tattoo now, right?
and so now that you mentioned work badges, this brings us full circle back to what originally got you started with it. And
Yeah.
again, I mentioned employers for a moment ago. Probably the best way to approach this might be a little bit like contactless payment, where you can continue to tap with your card, or you could use the implant. With the work badge, you could continue to tap with your badge and potentially forget the badge at home 2 or 3 days a week, or you could do an implant. And then the world that we probably want to live in is one where there's no way the employer could say, get an implant. But what they could say is, if you have an implant, you can use it. And otherwise, we'll give you a badge, right? So,
Yeah, exactly. And this actually makes the difference. So an employer will issue you a badge, right? But that kind of doesn't work for implants. You don't want to get a
mm,
company implant, right? Like, how do you even do that? So it's more like a perk. Like if the company wants to subsidize and say, "Hey, we'll pay for it if you want to get an implant," but it's your implant. We can't take it back after, right? And
yeah.
so that's a big important thing. You're in control. You own the thing. It's your implant. And so what you're doing is akin to what people used to do, which used to be a new thing, which is bring your own device. So people would bring their own laptops to the company and load up the software and stuff. Similar thing. You bring your implant to the workplace. It's bring your own identity, right? And you get registered in the system. But if you leave or quit or whatever, they just take you out of their system. You can walk, right? There's nothing tying you to that company. So yeah, I think there's probably not there's not going to be at least for a while. There's not going to be any implants that are so integrated and so I guess technically advanced that it ever becomes a requirement, right?
Yeah.
But I will say that I do see a potential future similar to how cell phones and cars, like there are definitely jobs where you have to have a phone or you have to have a car. And if you don't have one, the company will issue one or whatever. I see like 50 years in the future, maybe 100 years. I don't know when it's going to happen, but the idea of like Neuralink, cognitive enhancement, kind of external neural linking, things like that. I think that that's probably a possibility to be fair and honest, but that's fundamentally different from what we're doing. We are just making things convenient for technologies that exist today, and I don't entertain slippery slope arguments because then anything becomes possible, right? What if aliens come down and blow us all away? But I do see for neural, brain computer interfaces, there might be a day where it becomes not a mandate, but it just becomes a requirement of the job. You need 3 years training and a neural implant to do this job, right? And I do see that as a possibility, but I also see that's nothing new, right? Those kind of requirements to live in society, in whatever society you pick that's in a sufficiently advanced region of the earth, that's where we're at. There's certain minimums you have to attain to participate in that society. And the great thing about it is, if you look at the history of technical development, the deployment and democratization of these technologies, the gap between the people that have it and don't, that is rapidly declining. So, it took 50 years for every home to get electrified. It took 30 years for homes to get all homes, basically ubiquitous use of refrigeration technology. It took 11 years for people to get access to cheap mobile phones. It took, whatever. And now we see new services popping up. Chat GPT took 24 hours, and then like a billion people, tried it out. And so, this gap is rapidly declining. And so I think that there's going to be some potential for a certain level of technical integration, whether use of certain technologies to participate in certain aspects of society in the far future. But also, those pieces of technology be so available and so cheap that it's just going to be like, yeah, okay, I got to go get a phone at the corner store. Oh, I got to get the neural thing, whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be that, right?
Well, on that note, Amal, let me thank you so much for your time today.
Sure.
Maybe we'll come back to Neuralink. That could be another interview in the
Could
future.
be a
But
whole another thing if we want to talk about what's possible. Yeah.
yeah, for today, I want to close by asking what comes next in the near future for yourself, for implants, for VivoKey, and for dangerous things. What should we be looking for in terms of headlines for you guys in the
Oh man.
next few months?
Yeah, I would say for dangerous things, there's always fun things that we're just trying out. Um, for VivoKey, we're currently working with different form factors of implants, and we're improving performance. We want to again try to take things to different partner organizations. We might be knocking again on the doors of Visa, Mastercard with our new form factors and products, and saying, "Hey, let's talk." VivoKey is spinning out a company. They're going to be focused on wearables. So the same Apex chip platform with all the security functions, but in a secure wearable, something like a ring. We're exploring bracelet form factors as well. And yeah, for me personally, just keeping working on these interesting, fun technologies. Let's just the most fun that I have is when we're trying to link together things and consolidate these now disparate and difficult to use security and identity technologies, and taking down those hurdles to usability. That just makes me smile.
Wonderful. Let me thank you one more time
Sure.
for your time today, sir.
No problem. Thank you.